Welcome to Your Story Doesn't End Here, the mental health podcast for military and veterans. I'm your host, Rachel, and my mission with this podcast is to be a voice for those who don't have a voice, bring awareness to mental health issues, and provide value and solutions to help make life more abundant. All right, everyone. So we are back with part 2 of my story when it comes to mental health in the Navy. And today I want to hit on the medical side of things and how that whole process went for me. So if you have checked out my petition to the MCPON, I actually share a lot of the story on there, but I wanted to share with you guys exactly how the process went for me, so you kind of have an idea and an understanding of why I feel the way I feel about the mental health process in the military. And so when I joined the military, I already kind of had an idea that mental health was something that I had dealt with my entire life, mainly on the anxiety side of things. I didn't really think too much into depression or anything else. I just knew that anxiety was something that had been a challenge for me. And so going into the military, it really wasn't that bad. And it wasn't exacerbated until I hit my first command. And I can't pinpoint exactly what made it worse for me. I think it probably started to get worse when I joined the military and I was in my A school, and probably when I was going through my captain's mass, because I remember experiencing a lot of anxiety surrounding that particular situation. But I never really felt like it was anything that was interfering with my life until probably 2016. And I was in a C school at this time. And I can remember I was in C school over the summer. I was at my command in Washington, and they had sent me what's called TAD to this school, which is on the same base. This is the base that I was at for my permanent command. And I just remember one thing in particular really stood out to me, to make me feel like my anxiety was becoming a problem. And it was that I had signed up to go to school, and literally, I think a week before school started at the community college in my area, I actually ended up dropping all of my classes because my anxiety was so bad that it was causing me to not do things in my life. And I was starting to notice this in other areas as well, but that's kind of the one area where it really, really stood out to me the most. And so I remember talking to one of my instructors. My instructors that I had for the school that I was going through at that time were really cool. They were very personable. And I talked to one of my instructors and kind of told him a bit about what was going on. And he was actually transferring to a different command soon. And he was getting out of the Navy in a couple of years for retirement. And so anyone that's in the military knows that most people that are retiring soon kind of have this I don't give a fuck attitude, which can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing. In his case, it was a very good thing. He was very helpful because he just kind of like, how do I put this? Like, when you have this attitude, like, I don't give a fuck what other people think, you kind of push to the side the Navy's kind of bullshit regulations about, like, this is how you need to act and this is a process you need to take. And for a lot of people, having that attitude of, I'm just going to help people. And I've kind of seen a pattern in the people that I talk to for this podcast in general about when they hit that point where they know they're getting out. And I can even personally relate to this. Like when I knew I was getting out of the military and I made that decision that I was getting out and I didn't care about the military's bullshit anymore, I was able to open up this whole other realm of being able to help people without worrying about all the extra that might come with it typically. And it's sad to say, but a lot of times in the military, when you're really trying to do what is right and help people, you kind of get looked down upon for it. And this isn't a blanket thing all across the board, but I have seen it happen in quite a few instances where someone just really struggling and needs help and no one around them will help because they're scared of how it might make them look. And as awful as it is to say, the Navy in particular, I can't speak to other branches, but the Navy in particular is very much about like who you know and how you look on paper and this and that. And if you're that kind of person where you don't look good on paper or people don't like you because you're not following the status quo, then it can really jeopardize your career. So, deciding that you want to get out of the military or knowing that you're retiring soon can be a very freeing, it can be a very liberating decision to make or a very liberating just process in general. And I found that to be true for me. And I don't know if it was the same for this individual that helped me, but I really appreciated him pointing me in the right direction. But I just remember that when I told him about my anxiety and what I was experiencing, he told me that I should go to medical. And I had this fear of going to medical for anything mental health related, just because of kind of the stigma around it. But I went anyway, and I set up an appointment with my PCM, primary care manager, and it was a corpsman. It was a corpsman first class. And even if I remembered his name, I wouldn't mention it. But this guy had a very bad rap at medical in the area I was at. And he had, I guess, had multiple complaints put out against him, but for some reason they kept this guy doing what he was doing. And I don't ever know any like action got taken against him. But anyway, so I go to medical, I see this guy, and I tell him about the anxiety I'm experiencing. And I kid you not, the first words out of his mouth were, "You cannot be in the Navy with anxiety." And I look at this man and I'm thinking, what? And I know it's not true. Like, I know for a fact that that is not true. You can 100% be in the Navy with anxiety. I know tons of people in the military who have anxiety. So that is 100% not the thing to tell someone who tells you they're experiencing anxiety. And keep in mind, I'm an E3 at the time. So I'm very new to the military. I'm still within my first 2 years. And so anyway, he tells me this, and then he prescribes me with the medication called hydroxyzine. Now, if you know anything about hydroxyzine, it is basically a strong Benadryl. It's not actually like formulated for mental health. I think it's an allergy medication, but the idea behind it was to like produce this calming sedative effect. And like I think I took it for maybe 2 weeks, and all it did was make me super groggy in the morning. And it did nothing for my anxiety because I couldn't like take it throughout the day if I was experiencing anxiety symptoms. And it wasn't really doing anything for me other than realistically just making me groggy. The other thing that he did was he referred me to occupational medicine, and there was a psychologist, I want to say there. And I remember her name very vaguely, but again, I won't say it as much as I would like to because I had an awful experience with her. But realistically, it's not about specific people, it's about just the system in general, right? And so I went to go see this lady, and what she was doing was she was providing me with tools that were supposed to be very helpful. My problem was is that I was experiencing such bad physical symptoms of anxiety, my heart racing, not being able to think, panic attacks, crying. My coping method was sleeping, and I just didn't know how to handle what I was dealing with. And so I really wanted to be put on medication because I didn't think that handling the physical symptoms was something that I was able to do at that time. And having the physical symptoms made it very challenging for me to tackle um, learning coping mechanisms for anxiety. So she would give me these tasks and this homework, and she'd send me home after my appointment. And I would go home and I wouldn't do anything with it because the whole reason I went to go get help in the first place was because my anxiety was making it to where I was not doing anything with my life. Like I was presented with something that was like a daunting task to me, which for most people, like signing up for college, maybe isn't a daunting task. I don't know. But even things simpler than that, and I just wouldn't do them because anxiety was just like taking over for me. And so I went into an appointment one day. I think I'd seen her for a couple weeks, and I was like, "Hey, listen, like I'm not doing these tasks that you're sending me home with. My physical symptoms are really bad. I would like to be medicated." And she looks at me and she tells me that, I can't prescribe you medication because she didn't have like, it wasn't within the scope of her practice. But she also told me one thing that really stood out to me, and it still sticks with me to this day. And she said, listen, you can either be on medication for the rest of your life or you can do these things with me. We can't do both. And I knew at that second that I was not going to see her ever again. Like, that's just, it's not what you tell someone again. Like, just, yeah. So, anyway, at that point, I'm like really upset because um, I didn't feel like I was getting the help that I needed. And one of my friends had told me about mental health on base and told me that the front desk lady was really sweet. She's like, just go in there, talk to her, tell her I sent you, because she had been going there for a while. My friend had. And so I went into mental health. They gave me like the 10-page intake packet. I think I sat on it for like a week before I finally filled it out and went in there. And they got me in. I did my intake process. Um, I don't remember how long it was to see someone at that time. I don't think it was that long of a wait at that time. I think I waited maybe like 2 weeks. But they went and they had me go see a therapist there. And the therapist was kind of doing the same thing that occupational health was doing, just kind of giving me tools and things to help. And I had expressed interest in being medicated when I first went in there. And it's interesting because at mental health on base, they had two different psychiatrists who could prescribe medication. One was a civilian and one was military. And the front desk lady, I appreciate her for telling me this, but I still think it's a little fucked up. The front desk lady straight up told me, like, we're going to have to get you in with the civilian guy because if I put you in with the military guy, he's not going to want to help you. Reason being, I had something called high functioning anxiety. With high functioning anxiety, you can't tell from the outside that I have anxiety. I just look like a very productive person or just like a normal everyday person, right? But on the inside, I'm feeling all these symptoms. I'm just not showing on the outside. And so she straight up told me, if I put you in with this other military doctor, I think he's like a captain or some, I don't remember what rank. He was high up there. She told me that he wouldn't help me. She's like, that's just how he is. And again, another guy that kind of had a bad rap, but the military just kind of like let it slide under the rug. And so she's like, we're going to have to get you in with the civilian guy. Well, thank goodness the civilian guy was willing to prescribe me medication. He started me on a medication called sertraline, which actually was extremely helpful for my physical anxiety symptoms. And so once I got started on the medication, I kind of stopped going to therapy for a while because I realized that I wasn't really getting much out of the therapist. I think realistically looking back, her and I just didn't jive right, and that's okay. But I didn't realize at the time because it was kind of my very first, these were my first experiences ever with therapy. And I didn't realize that like a therapist and patient relationship, you have to find the person that really works for you. And I didn't know that. Like to me, it's like obvious now, but then I was like, oh, well, this is it. And this is the only person I can see. Well, this isn't working. And I stopped going. So didn't see her again after I think my first couple, maybe 3 visits with her. And I was able to manage just fine on my medication for a couple months, I guess I should say, a couple of years. Um, I actually ended up getting my associate's degree in like 2018, and I was doing really well. I switched to a new command, was like really doing great. But then, if you listen to part one of my mental health story and you kind of know the basis of my command and where I was at, you can kind of pinpoint a bit where my mental health started to decline again. And so that's when I started going back to mental health again. And I wanted to start up therapy. And yeah, I mean, I initially, so my psychiatrist, he was very much um, into upping the dosage of my medication, which I was open to kind of at first. I think he had me go all the way up to like 200 milligrams. I started at 50. And that's kind of all he could do for me was just kind of like change around the dosage of my medication. And I had expressed interest to him in starting therapy again. And I told him though, I want to start therapy, but I don't want to see the same lady that I saw before because they had told me if you want to start therapy on base, you have to see the same lady you saw before. And I told them, listen, I didn't jive well with her. I'd like to see someone else. They told me you have to see her first. And then from there, if you still want to see someone else, you can see someone else. Keep in mind, it was 30 days, I think, plus to even get an appointment with her. And I remember looking at my therapist and saying, why would, or my, I'm sorry, my psychiatrist, and saying, why would I want to wait 30 plus days to talk to someone that I already know I'm not comfortable talking to, just to have to wait another 30 days to see someone else that I don't even know if our relationship is going to be right. And him and I kind of argued back and forth for a bit. He ended up throwing his hands in the air at me, like no joke, threw his hands in the air. He's like, that's just what it is. You just have to wait. And I was so upset leaving this appointment because I felt like I was getting nowhere. And so from there, I actually took it upon myself to try to find therapists outside of the base because I knew that the base was booked out for a while. And when I talked to the people at the front desk, they kept telling me over and over and over, like, no one in town has anything. You're going to have to wait, this and that. And so I found a place that actually had an appointment and could get me in right away. I actually drove down, I think, an hour and a half away from where I lived to go see this therapist. And I liked her in the first session. But TRICARE would not approve me going there for whatever reason. I don't know why. And so I actually did end up finding a lady that TRICARE approved and was a little closer to where I was at. And in the era of COVID, we had Zoom appointments and it really worked well for what I needed at the time. It was a bit of a fight to get there, but disclaimer, I think it's absolutely ridiculous because had I been in like the peak of my depression, I would not have had the energy to deal with fighting with an entire mental health facility just to get me help. When the help was there all along, I just had to put in the effort to find it myself. But people who are like in the peak of their depression aren't going to have the energy to do that. And that's what really terrifies me. And I think that has a lot to do with suicide rates and where they're at with the military because the help is there. It's just someone sitting at a desk in wherever. I don't know if it's mental health. I don't know if it's TRICARE. I don't know who it is. They just don't want to put in the extra effort to try to help people get the help that they need. And I think it's really sad at the end of the day. I remember there was a town hall on the base that I was at. It was a meeting with the base skipper. The people from mental health were there. There was a representative from TRICARE there, and then a couple other people were on the base. And I had taken it upon myself to attend because I noticed that the guy from mental health was going to be there. Now, the guy that was a representative from mental health at that time, and I don't remember what year this was more recently. And I say recently, within probably the last 3 years or so. And I had stood up and I had brought up to everyone in the room the experiences that I had. And I didn't say it was me specifically. I just kind of shared the experience so they knew, like, hey, this is what's happening on this base and this is not acceptable. And the lady from TRICARE stood up and was like, well, we want to take care of our own. And so I don't know if this is the issue here, that the military legitimately thinks that they're taking care of their own by not referring out into town. But we teach this principle as we rank up in the military from E1 all the way to E6 and above. We teach delegation. And I think it's ridiculous to teach delegation to all these enlisted, and I'm sure they teach it to officers too, I don't know, but to not actually practice what you preach. Because at the end of the day, if the military can't handle all the service members that need mental health, which is a lot, like they can't handle the people that are coming there for help, much less the sheer numbers of people that aren't getting help that could use it and need it. It's not a bad thing to be like, hey, you know what? We can't handle this. And right now we're struggling with getting help on the base. So we're going to delegate out into town. And I get it that there's times when people out in town are booked because I've heard that so many times throughout my medical journey. I heard so many times from people just shooting me down and saying, hey, listen, you could try to go out in town, but they're booked out even further than we are. But like, it's crazy because even back in 2016, when I had initially gone for help, And I had kind of played around with the idea of seeing someone out in town just because I was a little more comfortable seeing someone out in town than someone on base because I felt like I could be more open with someone out in town. Um, I didn't feel like my career was at jeopardy or anything like that. And I think you see this a lot within the military is people that don't want to tell therapists on base the whole truth about how they're feeling because they're scared of their career. Whereas out in town, they're like, I can tell them, like I can spill out everything that I'm feeling to this therapist because they don't know, for me, I was AT, ATAN or AT2 or AT3, whatever it was at the time. They don't know petty officer Oswald. They know this person, this human being that they're working with. And um, it really is like such a different dynamic. And some people have really great experiences on base mental health. Unfortunately, I didn't. And I wish that I had, but at the same time, there's a part of me that's glad that I didn't have a good experience because it led to what this is today. And I'm realizing the scope of how big this problem is because I kind of knew I had an idea, but the more stories that I hear, um, the more I realize how bad it truly is and how much we need to push for change. And change is slowly happening to some capacity, but I'm not happy with where it is yet. And until every single service member can comfortably go to medical for help, can comfortably go to work and not feel like they have to hide how they're feeling, or can comfortably talk to someone that they work alongside, or even that they don't work alongside, and feel like they're being heard and validated, then we still have a lot of work to do. And so that's kind of the scope of my story and my experience on the medical side of things. I still have more stories to share when it comes to my mental health in the military, and I hope that you guys can't relate to what I went through because um, it's no one should be treated like that. And I've heard worse, and I wish I hadn't, but I've heard worse stories than what I dealt with. But um, yeah, that's just a little bit more about me and my story in the military with mental health. And I actually kind of a tidbit for like present day. I am doing my VA disability exams right now, and I just went to go for my mental health exam. I guess it was more of an interview, but I'm even learning more about myself now on the VA veteran side of things than I did when I was active duty. Because in just an hour-long interview process with this lady, I found out that everything, anxiety, depression, I'm starting to, as I reflect on myself, realize that I have some ADHD tendencies as well. And I kind of expressed that to her. And she told me that just based on what I told her, a lot of my stuff might be trauma related. And so she referred me to go kind of explore that more. And so um, it's always a learning process. And I never felt like I was comfortable enough when I was in the military to really explore the whole scope of what I was dealing with to really figure out what, or I guess lack of a better word, what was wrong with me, or what I was dealing with at that time. But it's never too late to explore what's happening with your own mental health. And if you are more comfortable seeking outside sources, I know people that use the BetterHelp app. I think it's an app, but there's so many different mental health apps out there. And I think that's really cool. There's so many different resources that we have access to, and things that are more affordable are coming out with COVID, and just realistically with the present age where we're more in this like electronic age. There's just so much more access to resources than we had before. And so if mental health is something that you are really struggling with, I encourage you to find some avenue that you're most comfortable with. And if you're not comfortable with the person you're talking to, that's okay. Don't ever let a therapist be offended by you not being comfortable with them. It's okay. Not everyone vibes with everyone. And that's just kind of one of the beauties of being a human, right? But that is it for part two of my story. I'll come back with a part three here in a couple of weeks. And thank you so much, you guys, for tuning in.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen in today. Each week, I'll be bringing you value in the mental health space and its direct impact on service members and veterans. If you feel you personally got value today from this episode, it would mean the world to me if you would leave a 5-star rating and review and share this to your audience. Until next time, remember, your story matters, your mental health matters, and your story doesn't end here.